Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's Employee of the Month, 2 months in a row. Leave a message at the... Hi, Jamie. It's me, Jamie. I just had a new idea for our song about the Name Your Price tool. So when it's like, tell us what you want to pay, hey, 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 and the trombone goes, blah, 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 and you say, we'll help you find coverage options to fit your budget. Then we just all do finger snaps while a choir goes, savings coming at ya, savings coming at ya. Yes? No? Maybe? Anyway, see your practice tonight. I got new lyrics for the rap break.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Welcome, everyone, to Creating a Family. Talk about adoption and infertility. Today we'll be talking about when parents struggle to attach to their adopted child. A really, really important topic, and one that I think we don't talk often enough about. I think you will enjoy this show, or at least find it very helpful. Here's a sample of what you will hear.
It takes about 2 years before they feel the same level of love for their older adopted child as they do for their birth children. So like you said, grow in love. And other parents have told me that it's kind of like an arranged marriage, and that you grow into the love, and it will happen. And the way to help that happen is to be talking to people about it.
I'm Dawn Davenport. I am the director of Creating a Family. We are the National Adoption and Infertility Education and Support nonprofit, and you can find us online at creatingafamily.org. One of the things we do at Creating a Family is we have an online Adopt Ed for Parents education center. We have online courses. We have over 100 of them. We actually have a center for social workers, too, where we have courses that have been accredited for CE credit. But today I'm talking about Adopt Ed for Parents. And we have a lot of courses that deal with attachment and helping our children attach to us and recognizing our own struggles in attachment. You can find our online education by going to our website, creatingafamily.org, hovering over the word online courses and clicking on Adopt Ed for Parents. There's a sorting mechanism on the right-hand side. You can sort, that one of the topics to sort by is attachment. So you can find, I didn't count ahead of time, but we must have at least 20 courses specifically dealing with attachment in all of its myriad fashions. And I think you will really find it helpful. The Creating a Family radio show is underwritten by our corporate sponsor, Ferring Pharmaceutical. Ferring has a free program they want you to know about, My Fertility Navigator. This program offers free one-on-one support for women who are struggling to get pregnant and are unsure of what their next step should be. Once enrolled in My Fertility Navigator, you'll receive a personalized guidance from a live dedicated person, a fertility navigator, who will provide information about infertility and fertility, as well as they can direct you towards nearby fertility centers. They can give you information about financial resources. There's just a lot of information they have. And what's nice is that you can talk to a real live person. To get more information, you can go to their website, myfertilitynav.com/CAF. myfertilitynav.com/CAF. And the /CAF is important because it lets them know that you came to them from here. This show, as well as all the resources provided by Creating a Family, could not happen without the generous support from our gold sponsors who believe in our mission of providing unbiased education and support to those struggling to create a family. Some of our wonderful gold sponsors include Holt International. They were founded in 1956, and they want every child to have a loving and secure home. They have programs that strengthen and preserve families that are at risk for separation, and they lead the global community in finding families for children who need them and providing the pre- and post-adoption support they need to thrive. We also have Children's Connection, an adoption agency providing services for domestic infant adoption and embryo donation and adoption throughout the U.S., as well as home studies and post-adoption support services to families in Texas. In addition to these sponsors, we also have other sponsors whose generosity allows us to bring you this show. We ask that when choosing an adoption service provider, please consider using one from the Creating a Family directories, which you can find on the service provider page of our site. You can search by location, services provided, number of years in operation, just a host of factors that we think are important when choosing. And by using these directories, you support those who support us, and we thank you. Today we're going to be talking about the topic of when parents struggle to attach to their adopted child. We'll be talking with Abbie Smith. She is a LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, specializing in adoption, and the Director of Clinical Services at Holt International. Perhaps most important, she is an adoptive mom of a child who was adopted at age 6 from foster care. Welcome, Abbie. This is a topic...
Thank you, Dawn.
Oh, good, thanks. This is a topic that lives in the shadows because I think really it's because there is so much shame and embarrassment associated with it. No one goes into adoption with the idea that they are not going to attach to their child. We try to do a good job of educating people ahead of time about the issues of attachment. And quite frankly, we try to do that for both the issues of attaching, for the child attaching to the parent and the parent to the child. But I think we get the message in that adopted children, particularly kids who've experienced trauma, physical, emotional, or prenatal exposures or whatever, may have issues associated with attachment. But the message that parents, or that adoption is a two-way street, I think we're a work in progress. One of our most popular and quite frankly poignant blogs was based on a question we received. The title of the blog is, "I feel like a beast, but I don't love my adopted child." And this, I'm going to read a section of the question that spurred this blog. It was, by the way, the family had adopted a 3.5-year-old. She says, "I think she would have an easier time overcoming her attachment issues if I could overcome mine. Everywhere I read, no one has problems with loving and sympathizing with their adopted child, but I do. I feel like a complete beast. I am civil to her, often affectionate, and try to be fair about her rights in the family, but I am unable to fake expressions of love. I listened to about 24 of your podcasts preparing for the adoption, especially anything about attachment and parenting, but now that I'm living it, it is a lot harder than I imagined. Do you have any resources on how to help adoptive families form the bond?" And on that blog, we've had to date over 82 comments, mostly from others who feel like they are in the same boat and they just feel awful. I'm going to read you one of the comments on the blog too, and then we're going to jump into our discussion here. This is a comment on the blog. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart for this blog. For the first time since adopting 1 year, 4 months, and 22 days ago, I feel hopeful and less alone. I have felt such guilt. Oh, my God, the guilt. I don't think I was seeing things clearly. I am calling my agency this week, and if they can't help me, I'm calling a therapist. I pray I can find one that can help me." Abbie, we say attachment is a two-way street. How often do you see families where the issue is more that the parents are not attaching to the child than vice versa, the child is struggling to attach to the parent?
I don't know exactly how often, it's not uncommon, let me say that. So our family is calling me, it's not surprising. So we do get calls about this issue, and it's very complex. And the things I think that are driving it are very different at different ages of the child coming home. So one of the surprising things we experienced and our families experienced was, about 5 or 6 years ago when Korea changed their laws and required more domestic home finding time before children would be released for international adoption. So parents were expecting their children to come home at like age 12 months and then were caught in this period of waiting, and the kids were more like 2 years when they came home. Mm-hmm. And it was such a different experience because the children were expressing their grief and terror, so they were aggressive towards the parents. And then this, of course, was very surprising, unexpected and off-putting to the parents. So, they had all this love, ready to love this child, and then the child was fighting them. So it became this battle. Other stories that I've heard, too, are that parents leave to go pick up their child, with such high expectations and love, and something happens when they meet the child. And they just don't have that loving. They had the loving feeling in expectations, in anticipation, but then it just died upon that physical first meeting. And as I've thought about this, because these are good parents, these are not awful parents. These are good, loving parents. And as I've been thinking about this over the years, I think there are things that are working against us. One is biology. So when you think about how nature intended, nature did not intend for people to be absorbing other people's children by absorbing, we are very attached to our own. We take care of our own, and we are an advanced species. So of course we would want to take care of children that don't have loving homes, but we're not wired for that. So I think that when it comes down to it, we can be fighting nature. That's had millions of years programming us for what we're supposed to be doing, and we're trying to go beyond that, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but I think that's part of what we run into.
Well, your point is well taken. That on both counts, that expectations and what biologically. Although I think it's only fair to point out that I think there are many parents who don't fall instantly in love with their biological children. Mm-hmm. And I think also it's associated with guilt and shame. The expectation is that we are going to automatically fall in love. And then I think some of us are just wired to grow in love rather than fall mm-hmm. in love. And so I do think, I hear your point that one of the issues that one of the reasons that I think some parents feel like they are failing to attach is a timing thing where they're expecting their expectations were they were going to be head over heels immediately and feel like a parent when in fact what they feel like is a babysitter, and then they start worrying about it when they really just haven't given it enough time. Is that something that you see as well?
Oh, absolutely. I've had quite a few moms tell me, I feel like I'm babysitting somebody else's child 24/7, and I have this feeling of when is this child going to go home. So and then the guilt is so dangerous, I think. It can be because it can build on itself, and we need to just really accept. My advice when I'm talking to moms especially is to just accept that feeling, that's where it is right now, and that's part of the process. So many moms have told me that it takes about 2 years before they feel the same level of love for their older adopted child as they do for their birth children. So like you said, grow in love. And other parents have told me that it's kind of like an arranged marriage, and that you grow into the love, and it will happen. And the way to help that happen is to be talking to people about it. So, having this discussion today is so important to helping these families.
Absolutely. I think it's helpful to know that it's not unusual to take up to 2 years when you adopt a child who is older, who is past infancy. It's not at all unusual. Let's talk a little about another reason you raised, which is unrealistic expectations. Both unrealistic expectations on ourselves and what we're going to be feeling, as well as unrealistic expectations of how the child is going to act. We've done, we have talked with, we've got a number of courses with experts talking about expectations in adoption. And some will even go so far as to say that the number one problem for adoption failure is adoptive parents going in with unrealistic expectations of the child. So let's talk a little about expectations, and both for the child and for ourselves.
I agree with that. It helps so much more if parents can go into it with an open slate and kind of fill it in as you go. I kind of equate that to birthing a child when you're kind of wondering, what color eyes, what gender. Of course, now we know more of that. But, what will this personality be like? And I think that the kind of process gets clouded when you get information about the child. I'm not saying don't get information, but, so often I see parents get the picture and fall in love with the picture, and they have it on their refrigerator, and they start imagining how the relationships are going to be with other children already in the home, what this child is going to be like when they come home. The child material may say, oh, they like music, and liking music in a foreign country in an orphanage can be very different from what it means here when a child that's been in the States for a while in our school system and likes music and may be gifted. The context is very, very different. So having an open slate and trying to just keep wonder, just being, I wonder about this and that, rather than thinking they're going to do this and, this is going to be a playmate for my last child, and, or I already have one adopted child and this will be the sibling that will make them feel complete. Those are all reasons and expectations that I hear from parents, but it's much safer to enter into this process with a curiosity about what's it going to be like.
Well, and I will say that adopting from foster care is very similar. We get some information, but we don't get a great deal. And we can talk with foster parents and the child who is fostering the child, and the child's caseworker. But the information you get, it's not, you're not living it. So you're not, even though you think you have a lot of information, again, they could say the child loves music. Well, that just means maybe the child likes country western and you like Beethoven. It doesn't necessarily mean what you think what it's going to mean. So expectations are really important. What about the expectations that we've put on ourselves as parents? Let's say we're going to adopt from foster care, and we've been dreaming about this. We've been taking our classes, or wherever. We're adopting an older child from international or foster. And we've been taking our classes. We've been listening to courses and we've been doing everything we can. And in our imagination, we have one expectation for ourselves. But when reality may clash with that, so how do we set realistic expectations for ourselves?
Well, I'm going to take this out of the thinking realm and into more of some self-care. I think that being prepared for the unexpected, that's something that we always try to have our families come down to, is expect the unexpected. And the other thing is, when I was talking about self-care, is I think when expectations aren't met, that self-doubt, that putting ourselves down, I think that the best thing we can do is stop and start taking physical care of ourselves. Because when we start in that downward thinking spiral, we tend to not take care of ourselves, and then that makes that spiral go down even deeper. So I mean, getting exercise, connecting with other people. So often with connecting with other people, so many people tend to do it when they're feeling good and they want to have fun or they want to share something joyful. And the other part of who we are is that we need to be connecting with other people when things aren't going as we expected, and to be reaching out to other people.
What I hear from a lot of parents is the problem with connecting with other people is twofold. One, there is the embarrassment. Everybody expects you to be head over heels wild about this child. And if you're not feeling it, you are embarrassed by that. And the other thing is that often people are giving you advice, and it just isn't helpful. They have not experienced parenting a child that has experienced abuse or trauma, or parenting a child that was brought into the family, at age 5 or 6. They've never experienced, or a child who has prenatal exposure and has the brain damage caused by prenatal exposure. And so your kid isn't acting the way that they're expecting it, and you end up not feeling supported by the people you've reached out to. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword there, because I hear your point. It's really helpful to be around people. So how can people find their peeps to be around, either online or in person?
Well, online is great. In person, I think that some ways to approach that is if you have a good friend to tell them, I don't want you to solve this problem, please just listen to me. Because there's so much power in reducing our problems just by talking about them. Dan Siegel calls it naming it to tame it. So just by finding someone that you can express that I feel guilty or that I'm not attaching to this child can reduce that emotional load for each of us. And if I can, there is a book that was written specifically for like family members in adoption. It's by Elizabeth O'Toole, and it's called In on It. And so that's another thing that parents can do, especially the different parenting techniques that our kids need, is to ask your friends and family members that see you with your child a lot to read this book so that you're not explaining all these differences to them. They can get it from the book. And, years ago, postpartum depression was very, very secretive. And, moms felt terrible about not attaching to this newborn. And now I think that's pretty well accepted. And it's also very well documented in the research that there is post-adoption depression. Same experience. It can get into a clinical depression too. So I think that we're on the beginning edge of having these things be more accepted and that more people know about it. But I agree with you, Dawn. It does carry a lot of shame, but there's also it's just like we did with post-adoption depression, is that, if one person can find a way to speak about it, I think that there'll be a domino effect, too.
I am so glad you raised post-adoption depression, because I, too, think that it is a cause, an underlying cause, oftentimes when a parent feels that they are not attaching to the child. What are some of the signs of post-adoption depression? They'll
be similar to, and they differ for men and women. So for women, it will be similar to like classic depression. So that would be like a change in your sleep. Either you're sleeping less or you're sleeping more. A change in eating more or eating less, whichever way you tend to react. A loss of interest in things that you once enjoyed. Irritability. So, it can be anxiety and irritability rather than like, oh, I'm so sad, I'm so depressed. You're just like, all of a sudden it's like you feel like this monster that, I snap at everybody and, I worry about everything and nobody understands. So all of those can be symptoms of post-adoption depression for women. And it used to be that they thought that if you had experienced postpartum depression, that you are more likely to experience post-adoption depression. Yeah. I got to get all these terms straight.
Yeah.
But that has been ruled out. That's no longer the case. So just because you might have had it with a birth child, don't think that you're going to experience it with an adopted child and vice versa.
Exactly. Just because you haven't experienced it after giving birth doesn't mean that you are immune to a post-adoption depression, yes.
Exactly. And I know some very high-functioning women that have experienced post-adoption depression. and it just takes the rug out from underneath them because it's like, what is this? It's being talked about more and more, and there's a lot of research on it, but it's still something new. And then men experience it a little bit differently. Men will start spending more time away from home. They may start working more. They may start and they may start drinking. So those are the two. I don't want to say the two big ones, but those are the two off the top of my head that I can remember how it's different for men, for dads experiencing post-adoption depression.
Exactly. How long after an adoption? I think that people assume that post-adoption depression, if it's going to be real, it has to happen immediately after the adoption. How long after an adoption can someone still be suffering from post-adoption depression?
Well, I think without intervention, it could go on for a while. And what's so insidious about this one is that it can be slow. It can hit you right away. Like I mentioned, some moms, have this feeling in country when they meet the child, but others it can be slowly eating at them and build up and build up and build up. So maybe you wouldn't get a diagnosis until a year after.
Okay. Yeah, and the bottom line is that post-adoption depression can absolutely impact the parent's ability to attach to their child. Go ahead. I was going to say something. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, it's like absolutely because, especially attaching to an older child, it's work. It doesn't happen naturally by just taking care of the child. You have to work at it. You have to make opportunities to play with your child. So it's almost like another job. And so if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling disappointed, the reality is if your expectations aren't met, you're going to feel disappointed. And then you're probably going to feel guilty about feeling disappointed. And so they won't have the energy to do it. And so it's really understanding and being gentle with yourself and to remember that they're just feelings. They don't make you a good person or a bad person. They're just feelings, and there are people that can help you with that.
Yeah, exactly. And the second bottom line is it is not uncommon, and you can get help. Yeah, very much so. Mm-hmm. You are listening to an interview on creating a family. We primarily keep in touch with our community through our weekly e-newsletter. We have two of them, one for adoption and one for infertility. You choose. We let you know about the latest developments in adoption as well as the upcoming resources that are going to be the new resources that we will be putting out that week. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter on any page, top right corner of our website, creatingafamily.org. Another cause for another reason that parents often struggle with attaching to an adopted child, particularly an older adopted child, but actually this could happen even with an infant. And that's the concept of mismatched temperament. I think that is powerful. I think we assume that our children are going to be like us. Now, I think that's a myth, regardless of whether your child joins you through birth or adoption. But temperament does have a strong genetic component. So I'd like for you to talk a little about how a clash of personality, a mismatched temperament, that type of thing, can influence our feelings of attachment to our children.
Well, it certainly can. And I think that, there are different schools of thought on temperament. There can be, and I agree with you that even in birth families there can be very different temperaments, and one child may not seem to fit. I don't want to say fit in. That's not the right term, but aren't as closely matched temperamentally as their parents. And I think that it's important to find areas of common connection, to search out those areas where the temperament of your adopted child can overlap with temperament areas of the rest of the family members. Does that make sense, Dawn?
It absolutely does. Let me tell a story. It really does. And what I always think is that as the parent, as the older person, supposedly more mature person, we have the power to seek this out, and it's not realistic to expect a child to. There was, and I've told this story before, but it's been a long time. And I won't remember it exactly. It was a man who had just felt he had absolutely nothing in common. Again, a child that had been adopted at an older age, and truthfully, he didn't really like the child in the least. He didn't respect the things that she was interested in. He didn't have much respect for. She was not interested in any of the things that he held dear. And she was a huge soap opera lover, and he detested soap operas. And he and we were talking about the idea that it is up to the parent to find an area of connection, or as you said, an area of common connection. And although it wasn't a common connection, he decided that he would try, and he did it reluctantly. But he came home the first day after having this discussion and sat down with her. It was a soap opera that came on right about the time he was coming home. And he sat down with her and he watched it, and he hated every moment of it. The next day, he came home, he sat down, and he watched the soap opera, and he kept doing it. And pretty soon he knew all the characters, and he began to, identify with some of the characters, and he began to wonder about them, much to his chagrin. And he came home one day, and his daughter immediately moved over on the couch, and she said, "Here's your spot." He came and he sat down. Next week, she had popped popcorn for them, and they sat there and watched it. And this was about a couple of months later, and he was driving up, and he had bad traffic, so he was running late. And the daughter was standing at the door, was sitting at the window looking out, and opened the door and turned the volume up really loud when he was getting out of the car. She said, "Hurry up, Daddy. We're about 5 minutes in." And she was telling, "Johnny did this, and it turned out, blah, blah, blah." And he said it really made a difference, that all of a sudden they had something to talk about, and he understood something about her, if only because, although I don't think he ever became a huge, fan of other soap operas, he found an area and it was up to him to do it. So anyway, I assume that's what you mean when you say that we as parents, it's up to us to find an area of common connection.
Absolutely, yes. It is the parents' job. We're the adults, yeah.
Yeah.
And look at where they could grow from there. That's just a wonderful story. So now they have that connection, and they can take that connection that they have between each other and take it to other places.
Right, because they have this connection, and they as opposed to him thinking of her as just an alien being that has nothing in common. Exactly. Yeah. I think another common, or perhaps not common, cause for parents to fail to attach is unresolved infertility grief. I want to read to you, this is actually also a comment that was on the blog that I mentioned, I Feel Like a Beast, But I Don't Love My Adopted Child. Let me read you this. "I am so glad to find that I am not alone. My husband and I adopted a 7-year-old from Asia. The child was adopted and returned once from a domestic family. He had been rejected by his biological parents and the second couple. Despite all the trauma, he is a healthy, super active, very well-adjusted, and happy kid. Everyone who meets him falls in love with him immediately. My husband and him have developed a bond already that I can see a mile away. In my case, I just can't seem to feel that joy, love, or bond that I'm supposed to feel as a mom. I went through 5 IVF treatments with no success. After almost 3 years, I am still grieving my loss. I am not sure if this is preventing me from bonding with this child. I look at him and I see no physical resemblance or anything that makes me want to hold him. It is extremely difficult to fake my love around others as, quote, he is a lovely, happy, adorable kid, end quote." So let's talk a little about infertility grief and how it can impact our ability to attach.
And I think the infertility grief crops up throughout the lifespan. So So some examples are, so there's that, exactly. This is not an infant. This child doesn't even look like me. The child will adapt some of the behaviors of the adoptive parent, and the adoptive parent does have quite a huge influence even on the biology of the child. Daniel Siegel talks about this in some of his teachings, where our own attachment styles and the way we relate to the child literally causes the nervous system, the brain, the neuron connections in the brain to change. So we do have an impact on the biology of the child to some extent. But I think accepting that grief, I think acknowledging that, yeah, this child doesn't look like me. This child probably wouldn't be doing X if I had birthed this child. And my experience in working with parents around this issue is that it tends to crop up at like milestones. So like maybe at 8th grade graduation or maybe even kindergarten graduation. There can be thoughts as the parents is sitting there in the audience watching their child walk across the stage. I wonder what my birth child would have been like, or how this would have been different if this had been a birth child. And I think that's totally normal. Grief is a very complicated feeling, and it's like all feelings, it's best to just accept it. I mean, I would never, ever suggest that parents say anything like that to the child, but certainly I would hope that it's an open subject between spouses, because, there's going to be processing every step along the way. And even when they get to grandchildren, there can be some wonderment about, like, what if this had been my genetic grandchild? Mm-hmm. The love is going to be the same, but would they have had my skill in whatever it is? I think that's really normal, and to accept that, and to talk about it in the proper arena.
We have a course on infertility grief after adopting, coping with, and it was with Carol Lieber-Wilkins. And I so appreciate in that course is that she gave some very specific suggestions of things that we can do to help us resolve the grief. Whether or not it ever completely goes away is as with all things, it leaves its scar. It makes us part of who we are. But we can get it under control. And what I particularly appreciate is the specificness of her suggestions. And so I would just recommend that for people who feel like they're really that infertility grief could be part of what they're struggling with. So, what are some of the signs of a failure of parental attachment? Although, to be honest, I think sometimes we know just because we're not feeling it. We just don't feel it. But what are some of the signs other than that feeling of being a babysitter?
Maybe starting to take shortcuts in the level of care. So that might be. So a person might find themselves saying, "Oh, it really doesn't have to be." Or let me put this a different way. They might find themselves saying, "Oh, that's good enough. It's really not that important." They could, a spouse might observe it. As far as level of care, yeah, they could see maybe if there are more than one child in the home, they could see some preferential. It might appear preferential treatment, not towards the one that they are having a difficult time with, but towards all the other ones. There can be, maybe not taking as much interest in how they're doing in preschool or in school. It's kind of pulling back a bit on that personal part of you that you put into your kids. Now, I don't mean any extent of neglect or abuse or anything like that, but just that it's not giving your all. Not that we give our all every day, that's inhumanly possibly, but, feeling like I do better for the other kids than I do for this one.
I don't know if this is, I have not seen any research on this, but I have noticed anecdotally that this issue of not feeling attached or maybe people are just talking about it more in this situation. But I certainly see it in kinship adoptions, and I've wondered, have you seen this? Maybe it's not fair to say more often, or let me ask: have you seen it more often when families are adopting a child through kinship?
No, I haven't seen it more often. I just think that the issues are different, especially if it's grandparent adoption, because they're thinking they're done. And here they have to dig up the energy to go at it yet again.
Yeah, that's true.
So I haven't seen it more.
I've wondered if, and again, this could be because they're more comfortable talking about it as well. It's not actually happening. I'm wondering, because I've seen more people ask questions about it who have adopted. But, oftentimes when people are adopting a member of their extended family, they've been approached. They were not actively choosing this as a way of building their family. There is a child in need that is in your family, and they have been approached to parent the child. So in many ways, it feels like it wasn't part of their plan. It's been foisted upon them. They stepped up because it was the right thing to do. And also, to be honest, I often question how that I think the preparation that kinship parents receive is often less. Sometimes because they're not willing to accept more preparation. I think that's true as well. But I do think it's less because at this point, especially through foster care, it's the preferred outcome, and so there's not a huge, push to try to prepare them in advance. So I don't know.
One of the things I've run across in those situations, Dawn, is that the old frustration, anger, resentment towards the parent.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe it was a close cousin or maybe it was a sibling, and they were always covering for that sibling or cousin growing up. Now, yet again, they're covering for them, and some of that resentment and anger can spill over onto the child.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah. I'm cleaning up your mess yet once again.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Even though they don't actually, they would certainly not say that, and they certainly know that it's not the correct way to feel, that this child is certainly not a mess, but a natural feeling that you would do it. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that parents can do. They've adopted a child. They are struggling because sometimes the child may be struggling with attachment, but sometimes the child is attaching quite well, and the parents know that it really is mostly them. But either way, the parents realize that they are not attaching as they should or as they want to with this child. What are some things that that you can do? And the first one I want to ask is a specific, something we tell people often, is fake it till you make it. Is that good advice?
People, there's different views on that. So some clinicians say that, some clinicians don't. I mean, obviously, you have to care for the child, but my personal opinion is that kids know when you're faking it. So kids, there's different types of, let me put that a different way. There's different degrees of security in attachment. And so when you're faking it, kids can pick up on that, and their degree of security will be less because they know something's amiss here. So what I prefer to tell parents, this is what I do, is to acknowledge those feelings. That's fine to feel that way, but they need to find some place where they can get some more clarity on what's going on for them and what it is about this child. So I would find a blog, I would find a therapist, I would find an adoption support group. It's amazing when you go into support groups and have and take the risk of sharing these feelings. How many people come back with, I had that same thing too. And so that's I don't think just faking it till you make it is enough. Let me put it that way. I think you can, it's like skimming the surface, which might work and does work for some people, but not, years down the road, you're still faking it.
Yeah, I hear exactly your point. Yes, fake it till you make it, meaning that you take care of the child, you go through the motions of reading to him and doing the things, trying to make certain that you are parenting the child in the way that you would have wanted if you were attached. But don't stop there. Yeah.
Don't stop there. That's the key. Don't stop there. You have to take care of yourself so that those feelings become real.
But it is true that the act of caring for a child is part of what helps us attach. So keep that up as well, and get help.
Okay, and especially if there are expectations. Excuse me. So one thing I hear from parents is that, especially with older child, they don't seem grateful. They don't seem to care about all these things that I do for them, and so that resentment blocks them. And those are kind of issues that I think they need to be talking to other people about, and to see if they can let go of some of those expectations. And what we don't, the kids can kind of, and I'm talking about older kids, whether from foster care or internationally adopted, they're in shock. It's easy to see them going through the routine of their day, and for us to think or forget about all the emotional issues that they are processing. And so they may not always be at the place of feeling grateful. It might take a long time.
Well, come on. I mean, how many of our kids ever really, my children are getting older now, and I'm still holding out hope. And my eldest is actually beginning to show, on moments of appreciation and gratefulness. But none of us should go into parenting expecting that our children are going to give us the accolades and say on a regular basis. Yeah, I mean, that's just whether that child's by birth or adoption. And yet it does. Yeah, it does feel that way, particularly because there's the society says, "Oh gosh, you've done. Oh, you're a hero. Look what you've done. You've taken in this, this sibling group of 3, and oh my gosh, you're wonderful."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But the kid
and all the money I spent to get you here, and you don't appreciate it. Yeah. I know. As I was saying that, Dawn, I was kind of chuckling to myself, because the first time my daughter appreciated something I had done was she was like 23.
Yeah. I'm holding out hope for my 23. Oh, yeah. I've got, okay. Yeah, and I've got one just about that age who I haven't had that experience with, but I'm waiting on it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure that it's going to happen at any moment. Yeah, exactly. All right, some other thoughts of things that we can do. Some that you've already mentioned is when you talk with friends, in order to prevent them from trying to solve the problem for you, to be upfront and say, don't solve it. I'm not asking you to solve it. No offense, but you don't know enough to solve it. I just need you to, well, maybe you shouldn't say that because that might tick them off.
Right. I wouldn't say that.
Even though that's the truth, but I don't want you to solve it for me. I just need you to listen to me. So being upfront on that, saying, telling what we need for that. And let's see some of the others. Go ahead.
And, we can say that to our spouse, too, because so often men, this is research-based, men want to solve the problem. And so if you just, tell your spouse, I don't need you to solve it, just listen to me. Just give me 15 minutes of uninterrupted listening.
Yes.
And it does wonders. Yeah. It really does wonders. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Some of the others. You just said this, accept it, accept the feeling. It's where you're at right now. It doesn't mean where you'll be out forever.
Right.
Take good care of ourselves, which means what I often will say is find one thing that will bring you joy and make sure that happens, and make it a short thing, so that you can do it every day. Maybe it's a cup of really good coffee, even though there's an expense associated with it. If you can afford it, treat yourself, and then once a week do something for yourselves as a couple, if you're in a marriage or a partnership, so that you're taking care of that relationship. So some other things in addition that you would, a family is the parent, a parent is not attaching. Other thoughts on specific things that you could recommend, and I'll throw one out that I have heard other people do, and that is keep a journal of one positive thing the child did this day, or one way that you can see that this child is trying. Or I knew of one family who wrote down one adorable thing about the child. She said she used the word adorable. That was what she was going to write in her journal, so that she would start noticing it. And then I would also think it might help to note one thing that you did that day that you feel like is moving you towards attachment. Any thoughts on is that a faddish type of thing, or does that actually help families?
Journaling is really good. I would say, but I'm just concerned if you have the parents write down something that they did that I don't want them to feel pressured to have those feelings towards their child, because I think that can compound the issue. But maybe to think about, this could go more of that self-care. So I would want people to exercise. And I'm not talking about going out and running a mile. Walking for 15 minutes a day can change your frame of mind so much. It's like a miracle. So I would want to encourage people to do that. You know, something that I learned from a foster mom, and this just sticks with me, and I used to go in and do it with my daughter, and I do it with my grandsons now, is to go in and sit by their bed when they're sleeping and just watch them while they're sleeping. You know, just so innocent.
Yeah, that is such a... Yes, because it's easier to love. I mean, all children are just beautiful in their sleep. So that is, yeah. That's a great one. I've actually heard that too.
Have you? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mentioned before trying to let go of expectations. It can be hard to do, but then you give more opportunities for your child's lovability to shine, or for you to be able to see it. It's there, but for you to be able to see it. And that's a big one. And then I think we mentioned finding things to do that is fun for both of you. So, you might, this is something else that I think expectations can come into it about, is that you love doing, playing ball with your dad when you're growing up, and you've been so looking forward to playing catch with your daughter. But she just hates it because she's not very good at it, and she just can't get it. So it's torture for her. So she's, acting out, doesn't want to do this. To keep trying other things then, to let go of that. That's not the fit. But there are going to be fits out there of things that both of you like to do together and can enjoy doing together. And it's trial and error. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else. There's so many fun things to do.
Oh, I think that is such a good one. You are preaching to the choir here. I think that one of the most important things that we can do as a family to bring family unity together is to, as a family, have fun together. And I think that we so often, in particular as our children age, let that drop off. And it shouldn't be. Gosh, as our kids age, they're more fun. We can do more things with them. But you're exactly right. It requires us to be flexible. So it's such a good point. Again, it goes back to the temperament thing. It requires parental flexibility because it's unrealistic to expect the child. And, I guess it comes up to the spending time with this child, even if you're not feeling attached. That feels like that's important too.
Oh, absolutely. It is. Very much so. Big Brothers and Big Sisters, probably everybody's familiar with that program. And those people get really attached to their little sisters and brothers. And they see them once a week, but they listen to them. They're kind of open about who they are as a person and try to find things that they can enjoy doing together.
Have you found, is there a direct correlation to the age of the child at adoption to the difficulty parents might have on attaching? Is it directly correlated? The older the child, the greater the difficulty that, the more likely that you will see parents struggling to attach, or is it not that direct?
My personal opinion, Dawn, and you might know this as soon as I say this, is that I don't think it's the age of kids. I think it's the attachment style of the parent. So I think certain styles will have a harder time with older kids. So I'm thinking, I think your audience you've had people on talking about the adult attachment styles, and so
we have a course on that. Yes, with Dan Siegel.
Yeah,
we do have a course on parental attachment with Dan Siegel. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So of course, the secure parent is going to be is going to do well with any age. I think that if somebody tends to be a little bit more of the dismissing style of parenting, which that's what I grew up with, so I have some of that in me. I know it. But that style has stronger expectations on how things should be, and values are more firmly entrenched for them. And so I think certain styles will have a harder time with older kids, because older kids come home with, some stronger life views, some stronger values, they have their own set of the way things should be, and so those things can clash. And that doesn't mean that it's over with. It just means okay, we got to step back here and take a look and figure things out. Now, there are some situations that I have helped out with where the older child really did not want to be adopted. And, they'll say, I just want to go home as soon as I'm 18. I want to go back to China. And so there's a lot of grief that child has to work on. And that can be really hard for a parent who has so wanted to help a child, and especially an older child, to give them an opportunity to have this child want to go back to, and they don't understand what's waiting for them, that there's nothing waiting for them. And so that's really hard for parents to navigate that with their child, to be able to hold their child's grief and still work on themselves in offering attachment to this child. So it can be very difficult.
That would happen in foster care adoption as well.
Absolutely.
Although we attempt to take into account the child's desires of being adopted, particularly as elder teens. But some kids simply that's just not. Again, perhaps an unrealistic expectation of life as it would have been like. But, that pull towards birth family is super, super strong. You mentioned attachment style of parents. Can you give us that is has been, we have an entire course on it, but without that, can you give us just a very brief overview of what you mean by our attachment style and how that can influence, and then briefly how people can find out what their attachment style is.
Oh, certainly. So there are three main attachment styles, and then a fourth one that can be paired with each of these three main ones. And these are developed in each of us by how our parents related to us. And these are established by the time we're 1 year old, so very early. And it's very subtle ways that our parents taught us of how to relate back to our parents, which then expands into how we relate to everyone. So about half of the population has a very secure attachment. They trust that they'll be taken care of. They have a positive worldview. So that's about 50% of us, and those are the parents that are very flexible and open to whatever it is their child brings to them. Another style, which the developers of this call the dismissive style, is when they were growing up, their parents gave them the message that we want you to be independent and do things on your own. We want you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, so to speak. And so that's the message they got from their parents. So these kids learn not to go to their parents for things. They learn to figure things out by themselves, so much so that this stands out very much by the time they're a year old. It can be measured. And then another style is what the developers of this called preoccupied, meaning that we kind of have some leftover issues from our – let me rephrase that, Dawn. So when these kids were infants, their parents sometimes their parents were not consistent in how they related to them. So sometimes if they went to their parent with an owie, their parent was very loving. Sometimes if they went, their parent would get scared, even more scared than the child. They got inconsistent. So they can be inconsistent in their relationships, meaning warm. They can run hot and cold. Let me just put it that way. And then the fourth kind is what's called unresolved, meaning somebody has an unresolved trauma or loss in their life that is still unconsciously exerting itself on how they relate to people. So that's it in a nutshell. And I'm so glad that you have that course, because it's so important for parents to be aware of this, because this can help so much with those expectations.
I'm kind of surprised that half the population is secure. That's actually hopeful.
Yeah.
So how if particularly, let's say someone is struggling with attaching to their adopted child, this is something they may want to explore further. How would they go about finding out about their own attachment style so that they can understand better how to work with this child?
Well, I think Dan Siegel, we keep referring to him. He's so wonderful.
Yeah, he
has a book called Parenting from the Inside Out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would recommend people start by reading that book. So it talks about how the messages we got as a child in relating can be interfering with our parenting. We might keep repeating the same mistake that we don't even want to do anymore, and that can help with that. And then the other thing, there are, and I can't refer people to specific places, but I would encourage them to go on the internet and search for adult attachment interview. Mm-hmm. And see if they can find somebody that will do it for them. It's quite involved and can be expensive, but there's so much insight that can be gained in that hour and a half of their time. It's just immeasurable. I had mine done on me, I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago, and I'm still processing it. I'm still learning things from it that are improving my parenting and just how I relate to people.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. And the last question I want to ask, because I think this happens more frequently than we're comfortable admitting, and that is when one parent attaches to the child and another parent is not. It seems to me that presents some unique challenges, both advantages and disadvantages. So if a family is in that situation where they've got one parent that does feel quite attached and the other parent that does not, thoughts on how to work with those specific families?
That's very hard. And some families, and it's not always because an adopted child was brought in. It can be birth children that have very different attachments with each parent also. So it's not unique to adoption. And I think I would suggest counseling for that. I mean, of course, parents can talk to each other about it, but I would be concerned that without a third person there, that there can be anger. There can be resentment. There can be all these feelings that might prevent parents from having a productive discussion without another person there to help them with it. And by that, I mean a counselor, like maybe a marriage and family counselor or an adoption competent counselor, to help them navigate those waters that they have such different feelings, because the one that is attached so often gets so angry at the one that's not. And how can you not, attach to this cute child? What's wrong with you? You aren't the person I thought you were. Those are all the things that I've heard from families and in these situations. And, they're so strong that there's such strong and deep feelings that the parents can have towards one another. Not insolvable. They can be solved, but I think that a third neutral party would be very helpful.
Yeah, and I think sometimes fear is a factor for the family, for the parent that is feeling very attached. oftentimes there is fear because they may think that the adoption will have to be dissolved.
And that does happen. Yeah.
And then there's a huge amount of resentment because they feel attached, they feel connected, and they don't want this. And so then there's blame and I think sometimes it helps to understand, for both parents to understand the complexities that can go into attaching and some of the causes that can cause someone to struggle with attaching to a child, to take some of the blame away. But you're saying that of course, we always recommend, if at all possible, for people to see a therapist that has competency in adoption. But don't let that stop you. If all you can find is a marriage or family therapist just for you as a couple, don't let that stop you. Seek that out if you can't find a adoption competent therapist. And we have resources on our website, creatingafamily.org, to help you find an adoption competent therapist. And in the past that has been harder, but I think we're making some pretty good progress right now into finding, getting help and getting more therapists with adoption competency. And one suggestion, an easy suggestion, I won't say easy because going back to the agency can sometimes be hard, but often adoption agency, the agency you worked with, will have counselors who have adoption competency and may be able to help and work with you. So that's one place to begin.
Yes, absolutely. I would start there. If they don't have it, they hopefully can refer parents to somebody.
Yes, hopefully. And there's some other resources online that are training institutes that are training family therapists for adoption issues. So we can recommend those as well. Thank you, Abbie Smith, for talking to us today about what I truly think is such an important topic of, and as I said at the beginning, one that carries such shame and guilt, that thank you for helping to bring some light to the topic of when a family or when a parent struggles to attach to a child. Let me take a moment now to announce that Creating a Family has a new underwriter, Jockey Being Family Foundation. Their mission is to strengthen adoptive families through post-adoption services. As their founder, Deborah Waller, says, one failed adoption is one too many. You can support their mission by buying a bear or a blanket at their website, jockeybeingfamily.com, and we truly thank them for their support. To our audience, if you would like to help us grow, and we hope that you will you do us a quick favor and please rate this podcast on the iTunes podcast? Go to whatever you're using, whatever device you're using to listen to this. If you're on your iPhone, you're probably listening via the iTunes podcast app. You can go from there and click on just our name, Creating a Family, and can rate us very quickly. It's a star rating, and we would truly appreciate it. To get more information about Abbie Smith, you can go to the Holt International website, and that is holtinternational.org. Again, holtinternational.org, and Abbie is a wealth of information on this and, quite frankly, on just about any adoption-related topic. I think you will learn a lot. Thanks so much, Abbie. And for our audience, I will see you again next week.
And now, an ad from Dad.
All right, save money on car insurance when you bundle home and auto with Progressive. Can I take these off? All right. What is this? This looks good. Wow, that's well made. Where did you get this? I'm talking to you with the hair. Yeah, where did you get this? It's good stuff. That's solid. That's not veneer. That's solid stuff.
Progressive can't save you from becoming your parents, but we can save you money when you bundle home and auto. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discounts not available in all states or situations.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's Employee of the Month, 2 months in a row. Leave a message at the... Hi, Jamie. It's me, Jamie. I just had a new idea for our song about the Name Your Price tool. So when it's like, tell us what you want to pay, hey, 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 and the trombone goes, blah, 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 and you say, we'll help you find coverage options to fit your budget. Then we just all do finger snaps while a choir goes, savings coming at ya, savings coming at ya. Yes? No? Maybe? Anyway, see your practice tonight. I got new lyrics for the rap break.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.